Today, which is Wednesday, April 22nd, in our second week of digital learning, we are studying hyperbole. Okay, a hyperbole is an example of figurative language. Okay, figurative language. So, in My Brother, Big Johnny Ka, it's another it's our tall tale. He's a larger than life character, and it's a joke, larger than life, because in real life we don't have people that are that tall, right? And he's really large. The story includes an example of a hyperbole. Okay, so a hyperbole is a use of an exaggeration or for emphasis. Okay, the details that Johnny is so tall that his head hangs out the front of the door and his feet reach out the back door to the chicken coop emphasizes Johnny's larger than life qualities, okay? And that is a hyperbole. So, figurative language, and we've talked about figurative language before when we have talked about similes and metaphors. And we had similes and metaphors in our last story. So we use figurative language in a lot of our stories. And figurative language is color we use to amplify our writing. Okay, so it takes an ordinary statement and it dresses it up to make our language seem more colorful. Okay, instead of just saying something is really big or that Johnny was really big, we make it more colorful so it's more interesting to read. Okay, so in our last story, we use similes and metaphors. So a simile compares two things using words like or as. So you could say something like, her eyes were, they shined like diamonds. Were they as shiny, and did they shine really like diamonds? They didn't really shine like diamonds. They were just so sparkly and shiny that they reminded someone of diamonds. Okay, but a metaphor kind of does the same thing, only it doesn't use the like or as. You would just say, her eyes were diamonds, instead of using like or as, okay? But it definitely is more interesting to read when you said her eyes were like diamonds versus her eyes were shiny. Definitely more interesting. So when we talk about Johnny Ka, by talking about him, you could just say Johnny Ka was really, really big. However, when you describe it like they did in this story, and I'm going to go back to it here, and they said, at 15, Johnny had grown so tall that when he stretched out in bed at night, his head hung out the front door, and his feet hung out the back door all the way into the chicken coop where the hens laid eggs between his toes. You can see that, right? Like, you can see him laying in bed, and I don't know about you, but I have a cousin who's like over 6 feet tall, and he really is so tall, his feet hang off the bed. And I could say, my cousin Tom is really tall, his feet hang off the bed. But the way they describe him here, if we said he is so tall that when he lay in bed, his head hangs out the front door and his feet hang so far out that like his feet are out in the chicken coop and the hens are laying their eggs between his toes. That gives you a total different picture in your head, doesn't it? Like, you're not just saying, man, he's kind of tall. Like, he is really, really tall. He's like real tall. You can see it. He's not just a little bit tall. And it exaggerates. It definitely exaggerates. Like if I talked about my cousin being that tall now, that would definitely be an exaggeration because he's not that tall, okay? He's tall, but he's not that tall. So that's a hyperbole. Let's go over a definition of what a hyperbole is one more time, okay? It's an exaggeration for emphasis, okay? Now, if I was writing about my cousin in that sort of way, we would know it was an emphasis. But in this tall tale, he was really that big, wasn't he? Because we talk about him being able to put oxen on his shoulders. Can we really put oxen on my cousin's shoulders? No, he's only a foot taller than me. I don't think we could put oxen on his shoulders. But in this story, he really is larger than life because he does all this amazing stuff, like moving mountains over to like the Denver area in Colorado, right? He would have to be really big to do that, okay? So that's what a hyperbole is. Exaggeration for for emphasis. And you guys could do that in your own writing. You could exaggerate things for emphasis and to make your writing really interesting. I would love to see that. So, your job today is two things. Number one, you are going to find an example in My Big Brother, Johnny Ka, of a hyperbole besides that one we just did. You're going to see if you can find your own example of a hyperbole to be able to share with the class. You can share it with me on OneNote or in Seesaw, or just write it down on a piece of paper and share it with us as a class, okay? And then you are going to, not just, I don't want you just to find it. I want you to illustrate it, okay? I want you to picture it in your head what it must look like, draw it, and color it. Kind of gives you a little art to do, something a little fun, okay? And then I want you to, we already did this on Monday, but just be able to show that My Big Brother Johnny Ka is a tall tale. I want you to remind yourself, find that example and be able to share it again about why Big Brother Johnny Ka is a tall tale. And I want you to be able to explain it to somebody else, okay? We talked about it on Monday, but remember, we might forget if we don't talk about it again. So, why is Big Brother Johnny Ka a tall tale? What makes it a tall tale? And be able to explain it in your own words. So practice it maybe with a friend. You probably don't have friends around. Or your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, someone who's around. Explain to them, what makes My Big Brother Johnny Ka a tall tale? Okay? That's your two things you need to do today. On your lesson plan, it says find an example. So you need to have an example from the story and be able to explain it. Okay? Just in your own words. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be long. And then to be able to find, illustrate, and when it says post, you can just share it on Seesaw or with me on OneNote, and then be able to talk about it as a class. All right, guys? Thank you.